For anyone tuning in on Facebook Live, we're just making sure both streams are going before we get started. Give us just a couple minutes. Do you want me to wait to get started? All right, welcome everyone. My name is Rachel Storm. I serve as the City of Urbana's Arts and Culture Coordinator. I'm joined here with Monica Scott, who's the Public Education and Volunteers Coordinator for Spurlock Museum of World Cultures. Together, Spurlock Museum, the City of Urbana's Arts and Culture Program, the Urbana Park District, the Champaign Park District, and 40 North Champaign County Arts Council came together to present the Great ARTdoors. Most of you have hopefully seen many of the sculptures and murals and artistic pieces that are now on display in 2 community gardens and all together 20 locations. We've had a real wonderful variety of artwork through this program, now in its 2nd cycle. Today is the 2nd of 2 community conversations, part of the Spurlock Museum's Contemporary Conversations series, where we're offering opportunities for many of the participating artists of the Great ARTdoors to speak more about their artworks on display, their own artistic process, what inspired the pieces, and what they hope people take away from them. I want to acknowledge that the Great ARTdoors also came about during the pandemic, where artists were absolutely invited to consider how artwork can spur dialogue, how it can invite conversations about our social environment, what's happening to us, and bring people together using art as sort of a tool and a focal point. And that's what we hope this dialogue this evening continues. We have with us a few different artists who are going to be introduced, but before I hand it off, I want to introduce Monica Scott, who is going to be our moderator this evening. And I will also just mention a couple of things. We are live streaming on Facebook, so we are going to try to pay attention to any comments or questions that come up through the Facebook live stream. So if you're following along and you're interested in learning more about this artist's work, or if you would like to submit a question for consideration from home, please use the comment section because we'll be using those as part of the Q&A portion as well. Please join me in welcoming Monica Scott.
To all of our participating artists this evening. I am very elated to have you join us and to talk more about your work and your participation in the Great ARTdoors. So we'll move right into the first question. I'm going to ask each of you to tell us a little bit about yourselves. And we can just go down the line.
My name is Gary Beaumont. I've been doing ceramics for a long time. And I took all of the ceramic courses at the University of Illinois because I worked there. It was free to take a course. And on a whim, I took ceramics. And I can remember throwing a pot one day and having our eldest son the next day. And I didn't do ceramics for 30 years. But a friend got me back into ceramics. I found that I still enjoyed it. I'm still good at it. So I've been taking it very seriously for the past 20 years or so.
Hi, my name is Anna N.K. I'm also known as Eka, locally, that is. I'm a visual artist. I specialize in illustration and animation. My interest is primarily in interactive animation, and hybrid reality art. This is something new, and I'm very eager to learn more about it, and hopefully I'll have a chance to work on more projects using this new medium.
Hi, my name is Kim Curtis. I'm primarily a painter. I normally paint in oil on scavenged panels if possible. I'm a big reuser, as you'll see from my piece. My work is really concentrated on how we manipulate our landscapes and the traces that we leave behind as we restore, erect, destroy, conserve, and reconfigure our landscapes. So the history that is embedded in our landscapes as we go about our daily business. I do have a parallel career in costume design. That was my first career on the West Coast before I moved here, and I do teach in the theater department here at the University of Illinois.
Hi, my name is Mohan Tracy. I do fabric artwork. I discovered fabric artwork after moving to Illinois from Connecticut about 10 years ago. And I love working with fabric. The possibilities of design and color, the so many ways to put them together and make design come alive. I love working with fabric.
So I'm Nelle Davenport-Pleasure. I am a recycled artist, so a lot of my work is done with anything you find in your recycle bin. I am also a fashion designer, a dance instructor, an author, and the list goes on. I do a lot of stuff. I got into the recycled art after I had a stroke. I was looking for ways to kind of get my mobility back. And so I started out rolling newspaper, and from there I just started making these little African dolls, and then from there it became telling my story and my emotions, getting them out through manipulating pieces of trash.
So thank you for telling us a little more about yourselves. The first official question, though, so during the last program, during my introduction and welcome, I quoted 40 North Director Kelly White, and I'm going to read part of that quote. When it relates to challenging and complicated times, art and artists have a remarkable way of processing, channeling, and expressing those experiences into something exceedingly inspiring and insightful. So what inspired your Great ARTdoors artwork? What is the story behind your theme?
My display was 3 large ceramic platters, and I called them my Planetary Platters, and which is fitting because it's ceramic. Ceramics all comes from the earth, and my only goal with respect to these platters is to make something that someone has never seen before. And I used as inspiration these celestial objects. In fact, I gathered up some pictures just to sort of inspire me. They're not representative in any way, but I sort of think about them when I work on the platters. And there's texture, there's color, there's several different media, and several firings. So this all falls under the category of how I approach ceramics, and I like to experiment. And it's in the experimentation that you find something new that someone has never seen before. So,
Becca?
Okay. So this piece is called Between Dog and Wolf, and it's actually a favorite phrase, a French phrase of mine. It's a literal translation, which is, it means, it's actually called Entre Chien et Loup, and it's an old French meaning dusk. And I thought it was so poetic and was something that I always kept in my sketchbook. I jotted down maybe, I don't know, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I don't remember exactly. And I had always wanted to do a project using this phrase, maybe an illustration or animation, and then when this call came, I wanted to use one of the materials I had used before, which is lenticular sheets, and they're actually similar to those little toys you find in the old Cracker Jack box. When you flip back and forth the image, there are two images, and it alternates as you move the angle. And that's exactly what I use, except these are much larger in scale, and I want to mimic the look of those LED screens, those pixel screens. So I constructed these squares, but I didn't want to use electricity or battery or anything like that. So they're actually a blown up Cracker Jack toys, if you would like. And I wanted the audience to actually move around the piece and then see different images and actually a story being told. It's not really a long format story, but you do see a wolf and a dog, but you're not sure exactly if it's a dog or a wolf. Hence the title.
The only challenge with the images that are depicted here is that because yours is movement dependent, it has to be seen, so everyone needs to go out and see it because you're not seeing both sides. But
Yeah,
do you want to
absolutely.
tell us a little bit about what we're seeing here?
It's hard for me to tell, but it looks like you're looking at, I think this is the dog portion, but it really depends on the angle that you're looking at. So you will see a dog from one angle and a wolf from another angle. And also there are a dog and a wolf in the background as well. And same with, and it's actually sort of the twilight hour. So you'll see changes in the colors too. The thing is, okay, I think I shouldn't take up too much of my.
We'll definitely come back to
Yeah.
that for sure,
Yeah.
because that gets very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Kim, would you like to share your inspiration?
Sure. So I created a monument. It's called Harvest. It's a monument to plastic waste. And I began thinking about the whole issue of monuments right around Charlottesville, which was, I think, 2016. And was really inspired by a group called Monument Lab that's in Philadelphia and was doing a residency down at the Pulitzer Arts Center in St. Louis, where they were mapping the monuments of St. Louis. And then during the last presidential administration, when I felt utterly hopeless. I really needed to think about heroes and think about who we revere and what we put on pedestals. And in that research, I came to realize that the word for monument is actually from Greek and Latin, and embedded in the etymology is to advise and to warn. So we often think of monuments as a way of kind of commemorating someone or something, but they're actually also warning signs. And I found that to be really interesting. And as I continue to watch our plastic crisis grow and continue to read more about the politics and the economics around it, I decided, and I happened across someone's Christmas lawn deer that they had thrown away. I decided to go ahead and try to construct a monument to warn and to advise.
Thank you, Kim. Mohan?
Well, I have 3 kites that are waiting to fly. A friend of mine told me about the Great Outdoors project and encouraged me to participate. And I'm very glad I did. My first thought was, it's outdoors, so it should be something kinetic, something that moves, something that is familiar and similar, but not exactly the same as when you last saw it. And I came up with kites. I love kites. I've been flying kites since I was a kid. And the idea was to have people look at it and wonder and smile and be happy with it. That was the idea.
Janelle?
Okay, so I, like Lynn, was encouraged to apply and to do the Great ARTdoors, and I was a little hesitant because I am a recycled artist and deal with things that if it gets wet, that's not really a good thing. So I wanted to challenge myself, and I'm glad I did. This piece really, it's a shadow box. And I chose a shadow box mainly because we spend a lot of our time in life looking out, looking at people and looking at things. And I wanted this to kind of be a representation of the emotions and feelings that I was going through during the pandemic. And so I wanted people to look inward. So that was kind of what got it going as far as the shadow box. And the things that I talk about are food insecurity, gun violence, hateful words, death, all the things that I think we as a community and as a world don't really look at properly, or we have different lenses that cause us to really miss the point. And so when you look at this piece, you can look at it in the photograph and be like, oh wow, it's nice, it's powerful, but when you get up close to it, you start to see the details. You'll see like there's children hidden throughout the food. You'll see spirits that are floating around. If you look at the face a little closer, there's someone in jail. Like there's so many elements, and the more you look at it, the more you learn. And the main thing that I want people to take away from the piece is that we all suffer from something in some shape or form, and there is a way out if we're willing to look at it and bond together and grow together, just like our food. But you can also see that the food decomposes and gives life to a new tree, which is at the top. The names that you see on the piece are names of people that were in our own backyard in Champaign County that were shot by police officers. And I was dumbfounded to find out the amount of people, I don't know, every time I look at this piece, it does something to me, and I think that's what I want it to do for other people. I really want it to evoke some kind of emotion. I want you to feel something when you look at it.
Thank you, Janelle.
It's interesting to think about these things being outside, because it's a real challenge outside. I figured for me, ceramic, it's hard as a rock, it holds the water, no problem, Well, I put it out, I chose to put mine horizontally because I liked the way the water looked in the platters. But then I found out, well, they mow the grass once a week and, it gets inside the platter and the leaves fall and turn the water brown. There's some weird reaction with the pots outside. It's a real challenge to put art outside.
I'm glad you brought that up, Gary, because one of the questions that I did have for everyone is, like, what physical changes have you noticed with your sculptures over the course of the Great ARTdoors project?
Well,
And anyone can chime in.
Well, I have the same problem, well, actually worse problem than Gary's. And Janelle also mentioned the challenge of, the outdoor element. I'm not a sculptor, and, I did this to get out of my comfort zone. And this is actually my second Great ARTdoor feature. And so I had, I've done it once last year, and this year was a completely different materials, and my squares actually fell off at times. And the park district folks were really kind enough to keep an eye on and put them back together. And it's been a learning experience.
I think I was actually trying to cultivate some degradation on my piece. Part of my piece is also speaking to the, in my opinion, less than completely thought out architecture that has been going on all over Champaign and Urbana in the last decade or two. We've got a lot of, frankly, shoddy buildings going up very quickly. And I was surprised to find out, walking down a street in San Francisco 20 years ago, that a lot of the, beautiful decor you might see on a facade of a building is actually carved out of foam and then stuccoed over. So my piece is, in fact, completely built out of foam. It's all built out of reclaimed styrofoam and insulation foam. And much of this insulation foam is in our homes. It's also being used in roadways and as a stabilizing material in a lot of different construction. And, for good or ill, there are benefits to that as well as detriments. But I did want to see how the monument degraded over time, and conversely, how the plastic didn't, because it's going to be around for a long time.
Yeah, I kind of noticed that too with my piece. Again, first time working with outdoor type things, so it was the summer, I believe, when mine went out. And so a lot of things started to melt, like the glues and stuff that I put in there. But I saw as it started to melt, it kind of added to my piece because of the decomposing food, and so it's kind of melting. So it kind of worked in my favor, which was kind of nice. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to work outdoors.
And I should also note that Janelle participated in last year's cycle of the program, and her piece, Seeds of Injustice, is currently on view at the Spurlock Museum. So we're really happy to have it here, and it's pretty fantastic. But you also brought up something. I wanted Mohan to have an opportunity to respond to changes that may have occurred with your sculpture.
Excuse me. This is the first time I've been involved with an outdoor project, and it was a big challenge. We had kites that fell off. We had kites that got tangled, and the kites were flying and rotating at the same time, so they were hitting the metal rods and the fabric frayed. So I had to replace that. The kites have a shape, and the shape is held by a 1/4-inch aluminum rods. And when they hit the main rods, they got bent. Which challenges we met very well, and we did a lot of repair work. But over time now, I've noticed that the fabric has got faded, the colors have changed. So the kites don't look the same like they did at the beginning.
Does that in any way change how you expected? Like, does it change? Because I know you mentioned earlier you were interested in people walking away with, feeling, I guess, somewhat joyful or smiling. Does the change in the color, the tattering of the kites change how you expect people to walk away from the kites?
I think most people see them at a distance, from a few feet away. So I don't think you really notice that change that much. I think more with something like this, with the kinetic piece, what the eye catches is the movement first. That's what you see first. And I think that stays with you. And then you go see the other details.
The thing that it did for me, it forced me to go out there and clean the Platters up every week. And as I did that, there were kids playing on the playground, and they came over and talked, asked what I was doing, and so I got to interact with the children at the playground, which was fun. So it was worthwhile.
I was thinking on that as well, because it was, let's just switch.
I was thinking about the same thing, because that had come up on our last panel, was the question of like, how have you noticed people interacting with the piece's lifespan, all of those things changing? And I was thinking too about our last panel, in which a panelist shared that tending to the piece actually became part of the experience for the artist. And, I'm speaking to Kinsey Fitzgerald, whose piece is a woman and a baby, and she was talking about it being kind of a metaphor for herself, like she had to nurture this piece, almost like a mother to it, the whole time that it was on display and while she was building it. And I'm curious to ask, did you have any similar experiences with caretaking for the piece, or with seeing other people interact with it and how it was being interacted with in the environment in which it was placed? Because each of yours is in different locations as well. And if you want to mention where yours is while you answer, that would be lovely as well.
Well, I can say that, so my piece is in Weaver Park, which I pass every day on my way to the studio, so it's convenient. And I get to just kind of check out the scene. And it's actually why I chose that park, because that park seems to have been added into our landscape pretty recently, or at least created as an official park pretty recently. And I really highly encourage people to go out there, because it's got one of the last stands of prairie savanna in the area. There are trees in the park that date back to the 1700s, and actually I know that because people, when I was building, I had to do a lot of the building on site, and so many people, and I know this happened in Mohan too, so many people stopped to talk to me and ask me what I was doing, but also to tell me about their history with the park. And there was a man, coming out to suss out the berry bushes. They weren't ripe yet, but he knew from his experience running those bushes in his youth that the berries would be ripe in a couple months, and he wanted to get out there first. And then I ended up meeting his wife about an hour later. And people stopped at stop signs and yelled at me. Someone tried to convert me. And I did actually have an unnerving experience, so I have to, mine is battery run, and although I bought this fantastic system of a solar panel that charges a battery, the solar panel is not far enough out of the shade to actually collect the sun the way I need it to, so I have to go and replace the battery every couple days. One of these evenings I went out and I had someone start to talk to me about voices and people coming to get him and all sorts of things as I sort of backed away with my screw and my hammer back into my car. But I will say I was pleasantly surprised to see that nothing has gotten taken from my piece. And there are some things of value there, and there's just been no tampering, and just a lot of, I have a QR code on mine, so I get little messages from people, and it's been a real benefit. And then the art nerds came out, and I think they've come out to everyone. So I want to thank the art nerds for showing some interest in everybody's work.
Kim, I'm sure most people know probably by now what a QR code, but can you explain a little bit about it and how people can interact with your piece?
Yes, so on the side of my piece, so the concept of the piece is harvest. If there's a deer that has been harvested, and out of its cavity is pouring kind of a sea of plastic. And on the side of the monument, on one side there's some commentary about greenwashing, and on the other side there is a quote by a climate lawyer named Mohan that says, "Plastic is the fossil fuel industry's plan B." And that is because the fossil fuel industry is really doubling down on plastic in order to stay solvent as we try to switch to renewables. And I can go into that ad nauseum for anyone who wants to hear it. But the QR code next to that sign leads you to a page on my website that gives you the whole lowdown on the fossil fuel industry and its relationship to plastic and its desire to aggressively expand it rather than contract it, despite the images of beaches and sea turtles and so on. So the QR code, you scan it with your phone, you just open up your camera, you face the code with your camera open, and it will prompt you to open something in your web browser, and then you can click on it and open it.
Did anyone else want to comment on interactions with your piece or its environment and where it is?
So when mine was in the Randolph Street Garden, which is where it was originally housed before it came to Spurlock, the first couple of times I think, can you guys hear me?
No.
No, it's not on. That's okay.
Sorry. Technical difficulty, go ahead.
All right, and we're back. So interacting, I would come to the garden, and I already had a garden plot there in my industry garden. So I would be there anyway for, tending to our vegetables and whatnot. But I would always go over to see if the seal held up, if the glass was broken, I was really worried about that. And to my surprise, it really held up. Like I said, some of the names kind of started, as you can see, kind of twisting and turning. because the glue was melting, but that was the only real thing that kind of happened. But it was interesting to have, just random people come up and just stare at the box. And they wouldn't really have much to say to me, and I could tell that it was affecting them, and that was pretty much the point. I really didn't need to have a one-on-one conversation with anybody, but I could tell it moved them. And that was the point, you know, to get them close enough to see, because from far away, it just looks like an ugly yellow and gold box and with stuff inside. And then as you get closer and closer, I think that's when people really started to kind of have more curiosity and, you know. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else want to answer that question? Oh, go ahead.
Don't be shy.
Well, I haven't had the chance to, witness much interaction with this current piece because I'm actually recovering from some health related issues. But the previous one, the one from last year, which was Learman Garden, there I had seen kids riding their bikes, and there was a little trail in front. And that was also a lenticular piece, but in a slightly different, where you actually see the panels from different angles. So as the kids rode their bikes, they saw a change in the images in the piece, and I saw them turn around to see what it looked like, and that was like the cutest thing. And to me, that was you know, that said a lot, you know. So, but it should be the same with my current piece, but it's more subtle because you want to be pretty close to see it. But even if you're slightly further away, you will see the change in colors as you walk.
I took some kids to Southbridge Park to see your piece. I'm not on.
I want to make sure people can hear us on Facebook. So sorry. I was saying I took some kids to Southbridge Park to see your piece, and what was most amusing about it was that they stood in front of it, and this is the piece that's on display now, and kept hopping from one side to the other to see it change
what I want.
from dog into wolf and dog into like night to day. It was very, very fun.
Oh, cool. That's wonderful.
Go ahead, Mohan.
The kites are at Crystal Lake Park, and they're in an open space, about maybe 20 to 30 feet from the roadside, and that's on North Broadway. So the cars keep going back and forth, and we've been there many times to do maintenance work, my husband and I, and people would look, turn to look. Always they turn to look. At least when I saw them look. And a friend of mine lives in the area. She drives daily down that road, and she said, every time I drive, I pass your kites and I smile. They make me smile. And there's a walking path along the cove, and people would be walking. They would be riding their bikes or skateboarding, and they would look at us and say, give their thumbs up, or they said, I like it. They shout, I like it. So they see something different, and they respond. And it's nice to see that response. Two gentlemen who live in the area of Franklin Street actually came up and talked to us. They were curious. They wanted to know what we were doing, who was behind this, and how long was it up. And we were complaining about the support system and the wobbliness. And they said, you should put concrete there. I said, we're not allowed to do that. So the interaction with people you don't know and yet it's a positive interaction. And I love that. That really, really was great.
That's really wonderful to hear, because one of the primary things we wanted to take away from the Great ARTdoors is sort of tapping into this community, a sense of community, not only greater CU, but also the artist community. I know quite a few of you have had an opportunity to visit some of the other parks and see some of the sculptures. Outside of your own work, what other sculpture resonated with you most, and why?
This is a hard question.
I know, I've been interested, because everyone's been talking about, yes, the art nerds, we've had an opportunity to, go and hear people talk about their art in front of their sculptures, but which one sort of stood out to you most, and why?
Well, my studio mate is Kim Curtis.
Yeah.
So I watched her put sculpture together. And I too drive by it many days and see it. And it just impressed me how you can put together something that looks so interesting from recycled materials and plastics and such. And I enjoy, I get a smile on my face every time I drive by it.
And a warning. Some very strong warning.
I really enjoyed seeing Nathan Westerman's sculpture as I drive out of the co-op parking lot daily. But I enjoyed also the article that was written about your piece, Mohan, and something that we haven't really talked about tonight about the title and what it means for you. And I would love for you to maybe share that.
Waiting to fly. I like kites way up high in the sky, but a kinetic sculpture would have been too difficult. Too difficult. We did think of other things like solar panels and other things to have them function properly. So the next best thing was to have them fly, but be restricted as well. My main thought was to have them moving in different ways, depending on the strength of the wind. They would look different each time. That was my main thought.
But the concept of waiting for things, did you want to go into that? My understanding from the article was it was a reference to immigration and waiting for certain processes to allow you to be where you are or be where you want to be, or
No.
that's what I understood from the article.
Well, that's interesting. That's your take on it. But I wasn't thinking that way.
Well, I just made up a whole concept.
I think that's wonderful, because you've given me a whole new angle to what I've done, to what you were thinking. That's wonderful.
Definitely like the beauty of art, the various interpretations that everyone is able to sort of walk away with. I think that's very interesting.
Absolutely.
I have to go back and reread that article. Where I got that.
Did anyone else want to respond to the question about other pieces?
So for me, I didn't actually get to see a lot of the pieces in person from this group. Last year though, I did, and Echoes was one that was like one of my favorites.
Likewise.
It was so playful. I don't know, I loved it, and my kids loved it too. So hers was one of my favorites. It really just invoked a lot of joy, because I think everybody was just in a depressive state, you know what I mean? And it was nice to see color, and it was nice to just see something bright. And so I really enjoyed her piece. And there was another artist, and I feel horrible that I've forgotten her name, but she put one in the park that's over off Myra Ridge area. And it was I think they're like these little resin with this wheat, oh my goodness, it was musical, but it was also light and feminine, and just, it gave me a sense of power and peace at the same time. And so hers was another one that I really enjoyed when we did the walk through of all the other artists. So now that I see all of the new artists here and returning, I plan to make a trip out and see them live in color, because I think that would be awesome. They look beautiful in picture.
And I think all of the sculptures will be on view through the end of October or November.
Maybe possibly into November.
Okay.
Till frost.
Until frost.
I had,
So we had, what, 16 months of not being out, not talking to people as much as we have in the past, not having contact. And one thing that I enjoyed about this was people coming up and, oh, I've never seen anything like that before. That gives me a lot of pleasure because, I can make all these things, and if someone doesn't see them and like them, purchase them, it's sort of a waste of time. But I like the fact that, it created some sort of interaction with other people.
Gary, I wanted to ask you if you saw birds interacting with yours.
I've never seen a bird like that, but that's one reason I displayed them horizontally. I don't know where they all went.
I bet they visit.
I'm sure they have.
I bet they do. Yeah.
Normally, with my platters, they're made for gallery walls, they hang on the walls. And it was a conscious decision to put them horizontally. And I think I mentioned that I put water in one, because I knew they were going to get water in them just to see how it looked. The colors just popped with the water in it. And they sort of, the water refracted the light in some fashion, and they looked even neater with water in them. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else want to mention a sculpture that they were enamored with? Go ahead, Edgar. Were you nodding because you want to share?
No, well, it sounds like just wish to mention mine, I'm mentioning hers. That's not exactly true, because I visited her piece last year, and, I listened to her describing what she shared today, but a little more in depth. And we were all in a sort of reflective mood at that time. So it really, I think, moved all of us who were visiting with her that day. And this time around, I wasn't able to visit all the pieces, but I did visit Michael Darren's Spurlock piece. I mean, just from the sheer scale factor, it's really tall, and you don't expect to see this piece in such a location, and the colors are they just really sprout out of the ground, literally. So that was really fun, and also with Mohan's kite, when I was driving to Crystal Lake, I didn't know it was hers. I remember seeing it, and I was like, what is this? I haven't seen this before. And I remember, checking it out on the way out from the park, so that was really fun. And I hope to make it out to everyone else's too.
Yeah. That's a challenge everyone has.
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
Great ARTdoors. You have to go see them all. You still have time.
well, I have seen them all,
Yay!
and I like them all. It's hard to put a finger on one that I really like.
Yeah.
Because each one is so special and
Yeah.
so different.
Different, very different.
And the design, the colors, the size, like your big plates, make your mind go all over the place, So it was hard for me to decide which one I liked best.
For me, the pandemic and this whole time period in which the Great ARTdoors also emerged has been so many things. It's
Yeah.
grief, it's trying to find joy in new things, it's been isolation, and then like hyper social in other ways, it's been Zoom meetings for days for some of us, and risky, going to work when it was difficult for others. I think there's been so much. I was saying the other day, it felt like a time warp, like the longest and shortest period of time at the same time,
Yeah.
but just sort of time got lost. And I think what I love about the pieces, both in the first cycle that Eka and Nelle participated in, but also this cycle, is that they're so diverse in terms of some maybe inviting really poignant conversation around heavy issues that we've been dealing with. That have been brought to the surface socioeconomically, with so many different things going on, but also for the things that are bringing us joy, allowing us to process our grief. I'm thinking also about the one that actually now is at Randolph Street Garden, which is Charlie Wisman's piece, that kind of is a monument to grief and loss. And so there's so many different ones on display, and I like that they also kind of share a range of the experiences that one goes through. Both from a perspective of what is lost and what we gain and everything in between.
I definitely agree. Everything for me has been very relatable in terms of, what I experience from day to day sometimes. When I saw Mohan's title, Waiting to Fly, for me, it was, I just love the title, right? And the connection to kites and the colors that you use, it was just very light. And sometimes we need that. I was having a conversation with a colleague, and I was like, we can't do this program right now, it's stressing me. We need to do something a little more light so that we can kind of, if there's so much pressure from day to day to have certain types of conversations and to sort of engage in. And it's very wearing, it's tiring on us mentally and physically, and I just needed something else, right? So we had to pivot and do something that involved dance, or do something that was a little bit more fun, and that's my takeaway from Waiting to Fly. It just gives me this physical lightness that is so necessary. But everyone's work definitely it connected in some way, and sometimes for me there's a crossover connection. When I was thinking about Janelle's, and this is leading to a question, I'm sorry it's taking so long, but there's so much recent violence happening in the Champaign and Urbana area, and I know that your work centered, this particular work created last year, has the names of some of the victims of murder. How would this piece look in the future? Is there a plan to expand it? Would new things be added? And this question would go to everyone in terms, as far as their current piece now. Is there a future for this particular piece of art that you currently have? And what would that be? How would it look? How could it be expanded?
Ooh. Okay. So I guess I would start by saying I hope I would not have to add to that. Because the piece, it not only talks about death and losing children and losing people, losing humans, losing people of color, food insecurity, that's not talked about a lot, and many people suffer from it. I suffer from it. The pandemic really took my family out. And to think about that for our future and how things are going now, I don't wish for that to be an add-on to my piece. If anything, I would hope that what I could do is elevate it to see growth, to see newness, instead of seeing death and decay, maybe life, flowers, you know. Maybe our voices won't be stifled anymore. Maybe we can look through eyes that don't always see an imprisonment of ourselves and not being able to speak our truths. Maybe our minds can expand and have more to say, and we can get rid of the guns and put books in our hands, get knowledge in our minds, show compassion, show love, show care. That's what I would love to see to elevate the peace. And I would add, not many people do this because I was really trying hard to be fancy because I saw some of the other pieces that went up before mine. The gold around it was actually supposed to illuminate. It was actually gold, glow in the dark paint. It never did it, but that was why you would see the gold specks around it, because it was supposed to basically bring you in and illuminate the story more. But I figured people caught on to it anyway, so just wanted to add that in there in case people didn't know the piece.
Well, I have fantasies of putting mine higher up on a pedestal, and actually, it will have an afterlife, and it will be higher, and also, you know, had I had more time and energy, I would have had that trail of plastic going all the way across the park. You know, it's all stitched together because I didn't want it ending up in the world, but so it requires a lot of fastening so that it won't end up in some bird's nest. But I would love to see that trail of plastic fill a room, or, you know, go downstairs and around the corner. So we'll see what happens.
Anyone else want to share how their work would grow?
My pieces are the total other spectrum,
Uh-huh.
end of the spectrum, you know, there's no particular meaning in them, their color, their texture, their shape. So,
Are you still making these kinds of pieces?
yeah,
Yeah, so maybe the body of work will grow?
yes.
Uh,
But ceramics may be a little bit different kind of an art form in that, you know, I talked about experimentation a lot, but it's also experiential, that you have to really get into the clay and work it. You don't just make one mug, you know, you might make 12 at a time. And it's a process. And sometimes the clay doesn't cooperate. Sometimes you start out, oh, I'm gonna make this, and it ends up to be something else because the clay is a little too wet or whatever. So it's very hands-on, you know, you gotta get in there and work it and feel the clay and go with what the clay is telling you to do. And that's true with the kills too. Like many of my glazes surprise me in the kiln. The kiln is making decisions and things that I can't make, you know. And I'm not drawing, you know, representative forms or pictures, or it's all very organic and earthy, but that's at the total other end of the spectrum of, you know, the content and some of these things.
But the process is huge. And I think that, you know, this came up on our panel last week too. The idea that sometimes as an artist, while you're making the piece is telling you what it's becoming. Or as you say, the kiln could be making decisions. You know, someone else could be making decisions. And that's a really interesting, I think, comment on process. And I'm curious if maybe anyone else would like to say a little bit about the process that you use.
Do we still have time?
Oh, yes, we still have time.
Should I say? Can I show my kites?
Please show your kites. Mohan brought kites tonight. You should probably, at one point at least, hold one up high for people to see who are watching online. Wow.
Because it was an outdoor project, I used nylon fabric, the kind of fabric that is used for umbrellas and parachutes. And surprisingly, it worked very well. So each kite has a design, different design, two different designs on one kite. I started with the size. What size I wanted, 2.5 to 3 feet. And then drew the pattern on paper. And then took the nylon, and it is a random design. There is no planning to it. Take a piece of fabric, join another one, keep joining until you get the color, you choose the colors you want and see if they go together.
Mohan, does that mean you cut the fabric in it like first and then you're kind of puzzling it together?
Yeah, I puzzle it together, but I just cut one straight side and just keep joining. Say if you join this, if you do this one, join this one, and then join this one, and just cut it on an angle so that it would be a different design. So it comes out different every time. I could not replicate this, it's too difficult.
So each is very unique.
And that's a random design. It's called crazy cooking. And this one is more organized. I chose the center, made sure I had the center, did the triangles. And then some places random, but most of the time there's a plan here. It's on this side. So these two sides are joined together, sewed together, except by the little opening. The 1/4-inch aluminum rods are put in. I sew the opening, and you have the tails here, so you have a kite.
Now the ones that are on display are waiting to fly. Have you flown any of these kites that you've made?
Not yet. No.
Not yet? Keyword yet.
I will try on these, because those are fading and not in very good shape. And that's one of the things about outdoors. I have great more respect for sculptures that are outdoors. They need a lot of maintenance, they need a lot of care. And if I hang those kites in my backyard, I'll probably have to replace them every 3-4 months.
Yeah. Anyone else want to share the process?
Can I just add that?
Sure.
My ingenious husband here, I wouldn't have been able to do this without him. Making the kites was the easy part. The hard part was the structure to hold them so that they would, stay up there. So he designed a triangular aluminum pipe structure with hooks on 3 points to hang the kites on. And that triangular structure was on a pole that rotated. And the kites were on pins that also rotated. So you have a rotating triangle, and then the kites are hanging, and they are also rotating on their own.
Lots of motion.
Yeah, also motion. So the triangle is moving, the kites are moving with the triangle and on their own. That was a challenge.
That's a challenge, excellent. I could go ahead, I can tell you when I go next. No.
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
I'm curious about inviting you to also share kind of a response to our previous question, which is, where is the work going next, or how is it growing for you? And I am personally aware of some other projects that you're doing, and how for me, like, viewing your work, I think movement is also very, movement animation is obviously a big theme, so I'd love to know to speak to that.
I don't know that this particular piece will, have new things added or become a thing, but I have done lenticular pieces like it in the past. Not exactly like this, but I have used the same material in the past, and that may definitely, come back at some point in another form. So this process involves me basically coming up with, if it's an animation, I would have to work out the animation either on paper and then, refine it on computer. Here, there are basically two images, or rather, two images of the same scene changing. So you'll see the colors change, and the forms change for the creatures. So, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, I think, and I think what I admire about your work is that you use a lot of, as you would say, the cracker box, like maybe an older version of something, and you've really made it anew. And you do this also obviously in your animation work with the Zoetrope and with other things that you've incorporated these sort of older technologies with new technologies, and I think that's clear in this piece too.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a recurring thing, I think. I do like, visiting old technology and somehow bring it to, what we have today. And what I especially like is the tangible aspect of, I do a lot of work digitally, to work out my animation and whatnot, but I like to be able to hold it, and this does that, so that you don't have to look at the screen to see transition or motion or movement.
You mean we can live without screens? We can see motion without screens?
Well,
I love it. You were gonna say something, Gary.
I'll say two things about the process, two ideas here. One is scale, how scale changes everything. What might work on a small pot isn't gonna work on a big pot. I'm sure that's true of painting and all forms of work. That's a big deal. And the other is change and growth. And today I made 12 mugs, and there's a show coming up that I'm making mugs for. And I can make as many mugs as you want, and it's repetitive, they're gonna look the same. But I also do what I would consider to be ceramic art. So, I always try to think, well, what's the next thing? Where am I going from here to there? What's the next thing gonna be? And that's maybe outside of finding one's voice as an artist, that's one of the hardest things, is to figure out what's next. How to get better, or do something different.
Yeah, definitely.
Those are two process concepts, I think.
Kim, you wanna talk about your process at all?
So my process, I primarily paint. This monument was a bit of a lark. My process really is about losing and finding over and over and over again, and destroying and rediscovering, and the accumulation of marks. So I'm teaching figure drawing in the theater department right now for costume designers, and a lot of what I say is, when I'm looking for imagery in my drawings or paintings, it's really about both imposing and arriving at. So drawing specifically to impose my will, and also editing in order to arrive at something. And I think there's a push and pull there that's really interesting, and it keeps things from becoming too literal. It allows for expression and happy accidents, and it's a little harder when you're constructing something that needs to stand outside. And this is definitely not as much of my wheelhouse. Of course, I do have some experience in theater, in this kind of craft work in construction, but mostly for costume. And so, thinking through this, I definitely had to solicit some help from some friends who understand construction to make sure that that didn't break up and fly away, because I knew it was going to be outside for many months, and we get some serious weather here, so we do. So this is a little bit more systematic, I would say. It's really pretty much the opposite of the way I work normally.
Now, at the same time, I'm dying to ask you, what is your method for selecting these plastics that you've selected? Because there's obviously lots of different objects pouring out of this piece. And we know the deer came from, what do you say, a neighbor's side of the road if they visited you.
Well, my method is to start with my 2 children. And, unfortunately, we accumulate so much during the course of our lives, and try as I may, it's really impossible. I will point out the U of I beer koozie down there. I have a thing about swag. I would like to go on record here to say we need to stop. I call it bag the swag. We really need to stop passing out swag, because it's, we all saw that tanker stuck in the Suez Canal, and I'm pretty sure most of that was beer koozies and wine charms. And we're destroying our ecosystems so that we can pass out foam tchotchkes at baseball games. The process is really a lot of culling of things that are right, and I wanted it to be cheerful. I like delivering a message that is happy, I think some of the most interesting artists are the ones that can speak to something extremely poignant or difficult to hear, and deliver it in a way that can be accepted. And so I wanted a sparkly, happy monument that looked colorful, and that's what I got. That's the benefit of plastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that we want to leave some time for any questions here. And Janelle, you didn't get a chance to maybe talk about your process. So maybe we go to you if you're willing, and then we'll take some questions from the audience.
Okay, I'm gonna keep this short and sweet. My process is this. No, my process with any of my art, with any of my, doing fashion and design, dancing, writing books, it all comes from suppressed emotions. For many years, I felt like my voice was not heard, and the pandemic just really kind of honed that in. And so what you see in any of my pieces and any of my work and anything I do is just raw emotion. It's what I'm feeling at the time. It's what's going on in my environment, and I want to scream, I want to yell. Even if I'm happy or excited, I still want to express those emotions, and I want it to be out loud and on purpose. And that's kind of my process. And so this piece, it was pretty much out loud and on purpose. I was upset that I didn't feel like I was providing as a mom enough food for my kids, that I didn't feel like I had, because I didn't have a job at the time. And I was looking and searching really hard, so I was frustrated that, I have resorted to picking food from a garden, which turned out to be the most beautiful thing in the world, because I'm picking food from a garden. I'm not feeding my children anything that would harm them. So it changed my mindset with regards to food insecurity and how I'd be able to, take care and provide for my children. The gun violence, I have boys, I have Black boys, and to see, children just gunned down like animals in the street. I have a daughter as well. I worry about her as well as my boys. I just want to make that clear. But it's more so the children that I saw that were getting killed were Black boys. And so I was angry about that, how are we doing this? Why are we, putting our kids in these positions? Why isn't anybody saying anything? Why isn't anybody speaking up? So I was just angry. And, I have a lot of people in my family who are police officers. So I'm conflicted. It's like I respect the badge, but I also don't respect the people who are doing these things. So I had to get that out. And then it just got to the point where, because of the type of person that I am, I like balance. So where I'm always feeling the anger and the hurt, and I also want to feel joy and feel love and feel peace at the same time. So that's why I created the Afro with all of the affirmations of peace and love and joy and community and coming together. And I just wanted everybody to just, feel what I was feeling on the inside. And that was the only way to get it out. And I was grateful for the opportunity.
Excellent. Do we have any questions from folks here?
I don't have questions, but I have a lot of appreciation for each of you and your perspective and what you've shared tonight. And I want to just say thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's been a joy.
So for anyone listening that didn't get to hear, we just heard some general appreciation for all of the artists that were here, and I can also run the microphone to anyone who'd like to share something. Anyone else like to ask a question or share a comment? Go ahead.
Hi, I would also like to voice my appreciation. I think all of your artwork is amazing in its different facets. It's so amazing how the perspective varies so large with one prompt, right?
I wanted to ask you,
Do you do it digitally or do you paint the art?
The illustrations are done on paper. I then scan them and digitize the images.
Oh, okay.
And then for this piece, I actually colored them digitally. So that there are two separate images with completely different colors, different creatures on them. And then I spliced them in a paint program like Photoshop with, hundreds of lines. And then I would make prints out of them. On top of that, I would overlay what they call lenticular sheets. And these have little grooves that match the alternating images.
That's totally for art. I love it.
It gets kind of,
No, I love every second of that. It's amazing. I also wanted to ask you what kind of kiln you use.
Oh, it's an electric kiln with computer controls. So, elemental kiln. And, all 100 kilns now have computer controls, which make it very precise, and you don't have to be there watching it all the time. Even gas kilns have computer controls now.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? You can ask your question if you like.
Let's move to the middle. I love that you collected like every ornament I can think of. It just like everything in there is like a memory of something. It just makes you think of like a shadow box of someone from birth to whatever. I really like that aspect of that. It's very, I don't know, it kind of makes me a little nostalgic a little bit because it's like Christmassy. It just makes me kind of feel, like you said, it made me feel very like warm and good. Mohan, you know my feelings about your kites. I'm Mohan's daughter. I can't say enough about yours. I was really struck by the names because I hadn't heard one of them. And that really hurts me that, and well, everybody, but it hurts me to know that I'm not given all the information.
Yeah.
Like you said.
Yeah.
It's just, I feel betrayed by the people who are supposed to protect us. As women, as a Black woman, I think the worst off in the universe is a Black lesbian. They had it the worst. I mean, talk about that. But thank you so much for that.
Would any of you like to make a comment about each other's pieces at all? Sorry, I'll rephrase the question. Yeah, and that's, so one of the questions that we like to invite everyone to kind of comment on before we close is also just, what do you hope people take away looking at this piece? Like, what do you want it to leave them with as they're viewing it and then moving about their lives after seeing it?
Me?
Go ahead.
The only thing that gets me going is when somebody says, I've never seen anything like that before. That's what makes my day. And it makes all the work that I put into ceramics worthwhile. And that's my goal, basically.
Excellent. Go ahead, Hecka.
I think I'll be just happy if people would just pause, even for a moment, just to investigate what this piece is about, even if they don't quite get it. What Mohan mentioned earlier about people just smiling, I think that to me will be, right now I think it's a lot. If it provides even a moment of relief, to what's going on, I think I'll be happy with that.
Excellent.
Well, I brought my soapbox. I really wanted to draw a distinct line between the fossil fuel industry and the plastic industry, because I know that I didn't realize that they were one and the same. And, I think in the past many years, we've seen the crisis of plastic in images from all over the world. And in my mind, I thought, oh, well, now that it's ubiquitous and everyone has seen these images, someone will do something about it. And in fact, not only is nothing being done, but the fossil fuel industry is the most powerful industry in the history of our planet. And they have every intention of expanding very aggressively the use of plastic. They are generating the demand at this point. And it's, so because of that, I would like to see people start taking action themselves. So the most powerful organizations, for lack of a better word, are universities. Universities need to divest from fossil fuels. We need to be contacting our government. We need to be calling our congresspeople, our senators, our local, state, and federal representatives. And we need to be talking to every checkout clerk, every waiter and waitress, and every corporate CEO that we can find on Facebook and any other platform we can find. But one of the if you follow the QR code to my website, the very first thing is a link to show you how to register to vote in Illinois. The second one is how to call Governor Pritzker to have him pass the Clean Energy Jobs Act, which, by the way, passed after decades of people lobbying. And I think it's extremely important for people to understand that while we are not corporate CEOs and we are not university chancellors or senators, we have the power, as we've seen with many of the marches, to really move public opinion and force the people that do have the power to act, and we need to be using that power as much as we can.
My wish, my hope is that people who saw kites had moments of joy, felt cheerful, felt joyful, that maybe the kites brought back memories of childhood. But the main idea for me was to make people feel good. I would like to share something I brought with me here. About 2 weeks ago, my granddaughter, 13 years old, gave me a gift. And she had painted kites.
Oh, your kites.
Now, the difference between these kites and the kites that are at Crystal Lake Park is that the ones at Crystal Lake Park are waiting to fly. These are flying free.
Your turn.
I must be the comedian in the room. Okay, so what I would like for people to take away from this piece, I want people to be able to look not only within themselves, but also look outside of themselves for change. And I don't just mean like, oh, I'm gonna love you today, or you seem nice, or let's march for something. I mean, really change their thought processes, change how they react to people, change how they react to situations, grow. I really hope that by looking at this, it will allow people to ask the right questions. Because I think for so long, we've not been asking the right questions. So that's what I want you to work with.
That brings us to the end of our dialogue for this evening. I want to invite us all to give a round of applause to these wonderful speakers. I would like to thank Rachel for being so wonderful and working on this program with me and coming in and moderating and developing questions and welcoming, and she's really fantastic, and our partners have made it so easy for us to do this work, because without our partners, Urbana Park District, Champaign Park District, Urbana Arts and Culture Program, and 40 North, we wouldn't be able to do this. You know, we have ideas, but it's the community that we work with that help activate those ideas and bring all of these things to life. So we are very appreciative of our partners, and also all of you artists, Janelle, Mohan, Kim, Eka, and Gary, thank you so much for sharing your art with us, with the community, and thank you for participating in this conversation. Yeah, for us, it's so important that art become a focus of dialogue, bringing people together, of course, bringing things like joy and everything out as well, and your work is doing that. The work is going to be on display for a bit longer, so we're going to try to keep it up as long as we can until major cold weather hits, and then they will come down. So if you have not seen them, we invite you to go to this website, 40north.org/programs/Great ARTdoors, to see the full list of all the current ones on display, as well as their addresses and locations of the parks and community gardens in which they now reside. See them all before they come down. And of course, our hope is that we continue to find ways to display them, and that our intention is to continue this program into the foreseeable future. Let's also give it up for Monica Scott, who put together a wonderful public education program lucky to have her also putting together opportunities like this where we can explore through public education, things like the arts and all that museums and public places have to offer. So really grateful to Spurlock Museum for hosting us this evening. Thank you to everyone listening and following along online. Thank you for all who joined us here tonight. Thank you, artists. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.